But it's like the statistics about domestic violence by police officers. The police officer who's brutal out in the street, the victims of a brutal police officer out in the street may not understand that when he goes home, he's brutal to his own family as well. And that's the case with America. They're brutal all around the world, and they're brutal and heartless against their own people. If you were to go through statistics coming out of the United States for with regards to human rights and civil rights and so on, uh, I've said it before. If those statistics, those exact same statistics, were coming out of any other country in the world, why the United States themselves would be at the United Nations calling out that country, condemning that country, and calling for resolutions against that country and sanctions against that country and probably regime change against that country because that country is so tyrannical. I'm saying if the same statistics that do exist in America existed somewhere else, uh, America would use those statistics as a justification for condemning that country. But the fact that those same statistics are coming out of the United States means that the United Nations has to look the other way. The same way that they have to look the other way everywhere else that America commits violations of the UN Charter. Everywhere that the United States commits violations of the UN Charter, the United Nations is forced to turn away, to turn its face away, to look the other way. So they have to do that when America does it overseas, and they have to do it when America does it at home. So if we're talking about whether or not or how this will impact American citizens, it will help you. It will help American citizens because if America is removed from the United Nations, then the United Nations can take America to the United Nations. America can be brought to the United Nations if it's been kicked out. It can be brought to the United Nations and held accountable for their actions and held accountable for their policies. I mean, we've talked about it many times, and Americans themselves should be aware of it, but they may also themselves be so propagandized and so brainwashed that they can't see the cruelty and the brutality that they live under because it's all been so normalized for them. For example, you've had 43,000 people murdered by gun violence last year. That's not normal. 43,000 people murdered by gun violence last year. That's not normal unless you're a war zone, unless your country is a war zone. But it's been normalized for you people, so maybe you think it's normal. The security forces murdered over 1,200 people last year. 1,200 people murdered by the security forces last year. Extrajudicial killings. That's not normal. They've normalized it for you, so you don't think it's terrifying. You don't think that you're being terrorized because you just got used to it. But it's not normal what you're living with. If you look at the incarceration statistics, again, I've talked about it many times. America, the population of the United States only accounts for about 5% or less than 5% of the global population. But 25% of all people who are incarcerated, 25% of everyone on earth who's in jail is in jail in America. That's not normal. And then beyond that, in the what they've become to call the prison industrial complex, you have forced labor of prisoners. Again, if this was happening anywhere else in the world, these would be called forced labor prison camps, slave labor camps. If that was coming out of anywhere else, that's what it would be called. That's a violation of the International Labor Organization. It's a violation of the International Conventions on Labor and Labor Rights, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. These are violations of the UN Charter, and you're doing it right there in your country. All of these statistics that I've mentioned, the shootings, the extrajudicial killings, the incarceration, this is all being targeted towards particular communities, towards particular demographics, towards African Americans, towards people of color. So tell me how that doesn't qualify as a form of ethnic cleansing. How isn't that some form of ethnic cleansing? That they couldn't be brought to the United Nations and charged with ethnic cleansing. When you're murdering those people, you're murdering people based on racial and ethnic demographics, racial and ethnic characteristics. Your security forces are killing them at a higher rate than they're killing anyone else, where the police officer is allowed to be judge, jury, and executioner. When it comes to you, if your skin isn't white, or if you come from the wrong neighborhood, or you come from the wrong economic strata, you can get shot, you can get murdered by the police, or you can get incarcerated and forced to work for nothing. Slave labor, reinstituted in the form of prison labor. I mean, forget about the morality of it. Forget about what's wrong with with you if you think that any of this is normal and that you can actually call your society normal when this is going on in your society. Forget about the psychological sickness that constitutes in your own mind. We're talking legally. That's all illegal, by the way. All of that is in violation of the United Nations Charter. All of that is persistent violations of the United Nations Charter. Police brutality, racial discrimination, racial profiling, as I said, mass incarceration. Even when we talk about the voting rights, there's restrictions on voting rights on the basis of ethnicity, on the basis of race. This is a violation of the International Convention on, or the International Covenant, I'm sorry, on civil and political rights. That's a document of international law. The United Nations is the arbiter of ensuring that people and that nations adhere to international law. Well, your country isn't doing it, and it's not doing it, it's not only violating it, as I said, against everyone else around the world, but they're violating your rights, and you probably don't even know that you have those rights. You probably think that the only rights you have is just determined by your American Constitution. No, the world has made a consensus of what the rights people should have, and your government is depriving you of your rights, but you don't even know it, and no one can hold them accountable for it. You can't, because again, even your political system is rigged. You don't even have a way to fight for your rights inside your country. Well, that's why the United Nations exists. You think it's only for so-called third world countries? You think it's only for so-called developing countries? You think it's only for so-called undemocratic countries? That's why the United Nations exists, so that they can make all of these countries respect human rights? No, it's for you too. Because your country, I hate to tell you, doesn't care about your human rights. Your government doesn't care about your human rights. It doesn't care about your civil rights. Look, they can't show you more clearly what they think of you. All you are there for is to work for them and to buy their goods and to be an automaton, a cog in the system, to support the market, to support the economy, do your job as a consumer, buy things, give us your money, and then go to work. And if we have a way to make you work for free, well, we'll do that. Well, you think that's normal? And again, as I said, if that's happening in any other country, your country would have the audacity to stand up in the General Assembly and give a speech about how terrible that country is. But no one gets to say it about your country. They don't get to say it about the United States, even when they're doing it themselves against their own people. Well, the only way that you could ever get some kind of justice and have that stopped is if the United States gets expelled from the United Nations precisely for these kinds of violations. And then the United Nations can actually take some action against the United States. But as long as America is in there, as long as America is on the Security Council, well, the United Nations' hands are tied. They can't do anything. So we need to help liberate the United Nations from American domination, and then that could potentially also liberate you yourselves from such an unjust system.